Welcome to Downpour.com's interview series. I'm Grover Gardner, and today it's my pleasure to be speaking with New York Times bestselling author Jonathan Maberry. Blackstone is thrilled to have published audiobook versions of all three novels in Maberry's Joe Ledger series, all narrated by Ray Porter: Patient Zero, The Dragon Factory, and King of Plagues, and will be releasing a collection of 5 Joe Ledger short stories called The Missing Files on August 1st. And on the same date, we'll be releasing Ghost Road Blues, the first book in Maberry's award-winning Pine Deep Trilogy, with the second and third books to follow later this fall, narrated by Tom Weiner. Jonathan, thanks for joining us. It was great to see you at the Book Expo a few weeks ago. Got a nice little video hello on our blog. Thank you for that. Let's start by talking about Joe Ledger. I understand that you've just completed Book 4, The Assassin. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the book is actually Assassin's Code, and it's gone through about 20 name changes. I even wound up resorting to a contest on Facebook to come up with a name for it, but we're going with Assassin's Code, and it is the fourth novel, and it's an interesting one because it has rich historical background, going all the way back to the Crusades, and then also some modern stuff, and a little element of the supernatural. The premise is that two groups during the Crusades pretty much decided that churches are filled more when there's times of religious strife. So there should always be religious strife because it fills the pews. And it's an agreement made between a representative from Philip II of France and the Crusaders and a representative of Saladin. So it's both sides who make the agreement. So essentially this is the origin of hate crimes 800 years ago, but it's a controlled agreement of it. And Joe gets caught up in the modern version of it today. And a lot of Middle East politics and a lot of social commentary in there.
Okay. Tell us about what's the genesis of Joe Ledger? What was the genesis of this character and series?
Well, it's funny. This is one of those things I've talked about with a bunch of other writer friends, and we all have unusual stories for how our favorite characters came to be, and mine showed up unexpectedly at a diner. I was sitting in a diner doing notes on a nonfiction book I was writing, and I had a conversation going on in my head. Two characters just simply started talking. Now, if you're not a writer and voices start talking in your head, this is a cry for help. I mean, you reach for the Thorazine. But if you're a writer, it's pretty much another day on the job, so you pay attention to what's going on there. So after a while, when I realized these characters were not going to shut up, but they really wanted to have their conversation, I took out a sheet of paper and just started writing down that conversation. And I didn't know who the characters were or what they were talking about until I really just let the characters have their voice. And it was a Baltimore cop being interviewed by a very strange, enigmatic character named Mr. Church. And the scene became one of the crucial scenes in the first book in the Joe Ledger series, Patient Zero. But at the time, I didn't know who these characters were. When I got home and transcribed my handwritten notes, I was fascinated. I liked the voice of this character, and I hadn't written in first person before. I liked the third person omniscient voice that I used in my earlier horror novels. So this was a different voice, and he was a total smartass, which I like. I appreciate sarcastic, even snarky humor. Always liked the novels where you have a character who is a wise guy. So I liked the voice, and I also liked the fact that beneath that there was a level of seriousness and sadness. So I just started making notes on who this guy would be, what would have created that character. And in the process of that, I found a story. And when I first made notes on it, I thought, okay, this would be a one-shot. This is a character who's too badly damaged to be an ongoing character. This guy's a mess. So I outlined the book, and in the process of it, realized that actually he is one of those guys who has found a way to accept his damage and use it as a weapon rather than allow it to be a vulnerability. And from then on, just Joe Ledger stories started popping up in my head like every day. if I live to be about 1,000 years old, I don't think I'm going to run out of ideas for Joe Ledger at this point. He's just a character that I can tell so many fun stories with, and he's, in a way, become a friend.
I was going to say, how long is he going to go on? But you've answered that question, it sounds like.
We have, so far, agreements for 5 books. Assassin's Code will be followed by Extinction Machine, and I have proposals. As soon as that's turned in, I'll be turning in the proposals for the next 2 or 3 Joe Ledger books. We'll see if we're going to keep going, but my publisher knows that I have a lot of stories I want to tell, so it's really up to the fans. If they want to keep reading Joe Ledger stories, I think we're all going to be telling them.
Wow, neat. Now, there's a series of short stories which you've written, and Blackstone we're going to put that together in audio, and it's called The Missing Files. It's 5 short pieces. How do those happen? Are they just little things that float around in your head, or things that don't quite make a full length? How do those little spin-off things?
Well, it's some of both of that. And when I was writing Patient Zero, I realized that a lot of the ideas I was having didn't fit in that book, so I kept putting them to one side. And after I had turned in the book, at first it was too long. I tend to overwrite a book and then scale it back. There was a really fun scene early on that had to be cut for length, but I thought was really an interesting way of understanding who the character was. It gave you more insight. In terms of a novel, it gave you the wrong kind of insight too soon, so it actually kind of cut off a reveal from later on, but it was something that my editor liked as well. So we decided at the time to take that and turn it into a teaser. It wasn't a full story, and it didn't have the 3-act structure of a full story. It was a teaser. It was a way of getting to know who this character was, and then setting up a little bit of mystery about what might happen to him. And we put that online originally as an e-story, and we got a tremendous response from it, and lots of downloads of it, and it built a lot of buzz. So I kept in mind, what could I do with deleted scenes, and what could I do with ideas that didn't quite have the meat to be a novel, but would make a really exciting short story. And I spent a couple of days, I'm a list maker as a writer. I tend to make lists of titles and themes and so on. And I sat down and I wrote out a list of short stories I'd like to tell with Joe Ledger, and that list is up to about 70 at this point. I said the guy is a compelling guy. He won't let me rest, and he gets into all sorts of trouble. So I keep wanting to tell stories about him. And one of the fun things is they're not exactly the same type of story each time. Some edge toward straight mystery. Some are very science oriented. Some are more military. He's the kind of guy that's caught in the middle of all that. And there's also that little bit of is it supernatural? Is it real? That I play with. I can play with a little more in the short stories because you can take a lot more risks in a short story than you can in a novel. And the short stories allow me to take some fun and very definite risks in terms of theme.
There's a movie thing going on. Is that right?
It's a TV option. It was optioned by producer Michael DeLuca, who had made Blade and Seven and Magnolia on behalf of Sony, and was being shopped around for quite a while. It hit a speed bump recently in that ABC had gotten to the point where they were deciding between that and a remake of Charlie's Angels, and they decided to remake Charlie's Angels instead.
Charlie's Angels. Oh, great.
So it got down to the wire, and apparently bikinis trump science adventure and action. What can I tell you? But there's still a lot of buzz going on with it in Hollywood, and it's being actively shopped around to other markets, and so it's by no means resting. There's a lot of fun stuff going on with it, and my agents out there are having a lot of fun with the various meetings they're taking on it. So I expect something's going to happen moderately soon.
The Pine Deep Trilogy was released in 2006, and the first book, Ghost Road Blues, won the Bram Stoker Award and was a New York Times bestseller. We're very excited to be presenting that trilogy as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that series?
the Pine Deep Trilogy was launched in 2006 with Ghost Road Blues, which was my first novel. And that's the thing that turned me from a magazine writer to a novelist, because I loved the format and freedom of telling a longer story. And if you've been doing magazine work a lot, you have to stick to the facts. In fiction, you can make stuff up, and it's a lot more fun because the real life doesn't always have a third act. You don't have closure to a lot of stories. But that series came out of my love of the occult and supernatural. I've always had a fascination with it because I grew up with an extremely wonderful but creepy grandmother who taught me all about folklore of Europe and other parts of the world. And I wanted to write a novel in which the protagonist encountered the type of monsters that appear in folklore. The vampires that we have in Hollywood are Hollywood vampires. They bear very little resemblance to the folkloric vampires. So I wanted to have characters encounter the types of vampires that exist in myth and legend, but with the sensibility of someone who, people who grew up watching vampire movies. So they don't necessarily know how to handle the monster they're encountering. And since I complained for years about not being able to find such a book, my wife said, "Will you stop, complaining about it and write the damn thing?" And so I did.
Now, Blackstone has we've got the whole Joe Ledger series in audio, and also we're coming out with the Pine Deep Trilogy later this summer. The audio versions have worked out pretty well. Ray Porter, our narrator for the Ledger series, seems to have struck a nice, hit it off pretty well with the fans.
If I had a dime for every time I heard somebody tell me that Ray Porter is the voice of Joe Ledger, I could buy North America. He hit that right on the head. I mean, not only Joe, but the other characters in the story. He nailed them from the get. He has Joe's balance of a sense of humor used by someone who's a damaged person, and it's really tough to nail that. And I tried reading some of the stuff myself just for the heck of it aloud, when I do book readings and so on. And even though I wrote it, I could never quite hit the right notes. And when I first heard Ray read Patient Zero, I was blown away. It's like, yes, that's exactly how it should sound. And the readers respond exactly. They agree 100% across the board. Never had anything but praise for Ray's performance. So I'm delighted that he was the pick for this series. It was perfect casting.
Well, great. Yeah, so are we. He's really done a fantastic job. The audio stuff, is that something that did you have that in mind when you were writing these? I mean, how aware were you of the audiobook part of this when you started out?
Well, it's funny. I am a big audiobook listener. I do a lot of traveling, and I listen to audio all the time. In fact, one of the reasons I bought an ebook reader is when I found out it had an audio component, so I can download books and listen to audio. It's probably where I do 80% of my leisure reading is audio. Most of the books I read in print, I'm reading for cover quotes, or they're writings by some of my writing students. So I don't get to read print for recreation as much. But I've been an audio fan for years and years and years. And when I wrote the series, I didn't expect it. I had no idea whether this series was going to be as popular as it's become. I was still fairly new as a writer. I was starting to write Patient Zero when my third horror novel was coming out, and we hadn't yet reached the type of audience that we've now reached. So I had no idea that it was going to be audio, and I was so delighted when it happened because I have a kind of a theatrical style when I write. I'm a movie and TV buff. I've spent a lot of time reading and talking about theater. In fact, I've written and had plays produced. So I have kind of a visual theatrical background, and I write in a style that plays to dramatic rather than simply cognitive. And I think that really comes across in audio. But a lot of it really has to do with the reader. You can have 5 different people read the same book, and you might have 4 misfires and 1 that's dead on the mark. So as much as I would like to take credit for the success of the audiobooks, a lot of it has to go to Ray.
Have you thought about writing like a 2 or 3 hour audio drama based on Ledger and the other characters?
I have an outline for just that thing. Something I was talking recently about to in one of my writing classes. People were asking if I would ever do a direct audio drama, and it's a format I haven't done before. And anytime there's something I haven't done before, I have a tendency to want to go and do it. So I'm actually working on that.
Well, we should talk some more about that, because
I'm sure you'll
Blackstone, we really love audio dramas. So cool, terrific. Well, listen, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's been great talking to you, and we're so happy to have been able to bring your books to audio, and it's been a great thing for all of us involved. And we look forward to more and more Joe Ledger.
Well, it works for me. And I'm having such a blast with this. I have to admit that vain as it sounds to say it, the audiobooks of my Joe Ledger series get heavy rotation on my iPod. So I've listened to each of them a couple of times now. And to tell you the truth, one last thing, the way Ray is performing it tends to now be the way I hear the characters when I'm writing them. And I found that to be very true when I was writing Assassin's Code. And as I'm making notes for Extinction Machine, I'm hearing Ray's voice as the characters while I'm writing it, which is kind of fun. So I think Ray should enjoy that. I'm sure the fans will as well.
You going to start throwing him curveballs?
I'd love to. I've actually come up with some unpronounceable names in the fourth book, and a lot of words in Persian. So ball in your court, Ray.
Oh, great. Okay, well, I'm sure I'll hear about that.
Okay. And Grover, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for joining us for this exclusive interview. You can find all of Blackstone Audio's titles and more at Downpour.com.